Regina Russell this morning, and why don't we just begin with you talking a little bit about your background, what your family history, and growing up in Florida, but a history in the North before that.
Okay, well, I'll start with my dad, Bobby Stevens. He was born and raised in Detroit, Michigan. I'm not too sure when he left there. As far as my mom, she was born Flora Stevens, or Flora Williams back then, born in DeLand, Florida. Now, I don't know how they connected in Bridgeport, Connecticut, where I was born in the younger brother, but I believed I left there at about 3 years old and migrated to DeLand, Florida, and after that, Miami, Florida, where I spent like 32 years of my life before moving here to Acworth in 2004.
Okay. Well, talk a little bit where you went to school and what DeLand, Florida was like when you were growing up there.
As far as DeLand, I don't think I was there too long, maybe a year or two, so I don't believe I had started school as of yet. But when I did, or the family migrated to Miami, I remember attending Comstock Elementary, was my first elementary school. After that, I went to Chetelawn, then migrated to Miami Edison Middle School, and after that, Miami Edison Senior High, where I graduated in 1985 at the top of my class.
At the top of your
Yes,
class?
top 10%.
Well, what was it like growing up in that part of Florida?
It was pretty. It was nice. You had the beaches. We went to the parks on the weekend. I came from a really great family, where our parents took time with us and taught us. We would go to church on Saturday because we grew up in the Jewish faith or Judaism.
Oh, really?
Yes. So we would actually go to church.
Come about?
I'm not too sure. My mom says there's a history in the family of that, but she was like, it was more like a traditional thing, not like the Orthodox Jews or anything like that. But she said it traces back. I believe so.
Okay.
Yeah, but the hardest part about that was not being able to celebrate. We didn't celebrate Christmas or Easter, and then you had your friends that would be like, "Why?" and all these questions that we really couldn't answer except our parents said so. This is the way it is. Our parents said so. So it was kind of hard, though.
That sounds like an interesting story of how they converted to Judaism.
Yes. Very
Through
interesting.
marriage, maybe, somewhere along
Yeah, it seems like there were people on both my mother and my father's side that kind of, participated or took part into that religion. So as far as the full history on it, I'm not sure.
Well, in Miami, there would be a large Jewish
Oh, yes,
population.
there is. Miami Beach. There is. Yeah.
Wow, so you went to synagogue instead of...
Well, they had their
church?
own church. It was called the Church of God and Saints of Christ.
Oh, okay.
So, but it was taken out of the Jacksonville area. And it was more like African American. So like I said, it was like a segment, and there were some things kind of like picking and choosing, like, okay, we're going to celebrate the Sabbath, but we're not going to celebrate Yom Kippur or Rosh Hashanah or Hanukkah and things like that. So it was very confusing as a child, like what are we doing, or what are we supposed to be? So
it's like Messianic Judaism?
I'm not too sure.
Well, you're right.
Yeah.
That's where you grew up.
Yes. It was just like you did what you were told. We're going to church on this day. It was like, okay.
So you stood out. Didn't you?
Yes, very much so.
Okay.
Even my brothers, to the point where they had the yarmulkes they had to wear, and we would have to walk to church sometime, and we felt it was so embarrassing because it was like, we were just like really stood out in the crowd, and we would be asked questions by our peers that we couldn't even answer ourselves. It was just like, just because this is the way it is. So, yeah.
Wow. Okay. And you spent a lot of time at the beach, it sounds like.
Yeah, the beach, public parks, and things like that. My father, he was very much an outdoorsman, so he made sure we were there to participate in the nature.
Great. Well, and then you went to work out of high school, I guess?
Yes. Actually, while I was still in high school in 11th grade, I remember working for an elderly couple, the Washingtons, and they were so sweet. And they just needed someone to come in and kind of iron for them or tidy up the house, clean the bathrooms, and so forth. I remember Miss Washington, she was on dialysis. about 4 days out of the week, so they really needed some assistance, And my mom allowed me. It was like right across the street, and they would give. It was like $25 a week. And like I said, I remember earning or saving enough to buy my first car. And I remember one Christmas, I think the first Christmas I worked for them out of the 3 years, they brought me like a little color television set that I was just so proud of. And I was like, oh my gosh, I couldn't believe that someone valued me that much, because I was like, I enjoyed what I did, and it wasn't a big deal, to help someone else. So, yeah.
That's great. So, were you a first child?
No, I'm actually second child.
Okay.
I have an older brother and 3 younger siblings.
Okay. But you like to go to work. You always worked, it sounds like.
Yes, I always was at work in between school and earning the grades, keeping up my academics.
And then, let's see, you went to a community college. Was it Miami-Dade?
Yes, Miami-Dade Community College,
Okay.
yes, which I understand now is Miami-Dade College.
Yeah.
So they've turned into a
Oh,
4-year institution.
They've had a huge enrollment. for
Yes,
ages.
and several campuses. I was at the North Campus.
And then you worked for a company that was making pacemakers.
Quarters Corporation in Miami Lakes, yes.
And what were you doing for them?
Pretty much office assistant, answering telephones, doing some filing, typing, and so forth.
Okay. And from there, you went to a clerk typist for Cinta?
Yeah,
Cintas?
Cintas, the uniform people. Yes, they deliver uniforms and floor mats and things like that to the different companies. They're still big today.
Right. And then you go to work for a bank.
Yes, Centrust Bank. I worked there for about a year just to find out that the teller position or business wasn't for me.
Oh, really?
Yes, it didn't too much like being a teller.
So then you go to work in municipal government, and you've been working for cities ever since.
Yes, actually, before or after Centrust, I went to work for Capital Bank, which I was a receptionist there and customer service rep, and then I went into the government. I remember vaguely just seeing getting the ads one day, just kind of at my wit's end, like I don't want to do this anymore, and seeing a position for a clerk typist at the city of North Bay Village, where I was there from 91 to 93 roughly.
How
But
big
yes.
a village was it?
North Bay Village is probably a good, I would say maybe 500 to 1,000 residents. It was pretty small, but as far as the tax base and the homes being right there off the Kennedy Causeway and these $1 million homes and things like that, they had the money to support their budget and their, their community. So.
So you kind of go up the chain, I guess, with them to even interim village manager at one.
Well, actually, that was with the village of El Portel. So I was at the city of North Bay Village from 91 to 93. And in the summer of 93, I went to work for the village of El Portel, where I started off as the assistant to the village clerk, and then they dropped to and I went to assistant village clerk, then village clerk, and then the village clerk interim village manager for about 6 months.
Well, that had to be a very good learning experience.
It was.
Coming
It
to
was.
Acworth.
It was. It was like I call that my boot camp of government and government.
Okay, so you've been in Florida all that time, and what in the world brought you to Acworth, Georgia?
Well, my sister-in-law moved here first. She had been in the Navy for like 14 years, and back in 2003, I want to say, we came and visited for Thanksgiving, and we're looking around like, this place is amazing. It's more like the country feel, and just being in such a busy city with in Miami, it was just like always something going on, and we kind of just wanted to shy away from that and wanted someplace that was family-oriented to raise our children, who were like anywhere between 10 and 13, 14 at the time. And we kind of explored it a little more, went back home, just to make a long story short, put the house on the market. It sold, and it was like, okay, we're ready to go, But I really like Georgia. Yeah.
Well, I imagine back then, a good price on houses coming here from Miami, Florida.
Oh my gosh, it was, yes, that's another thing. It was so much cheaper. You get a bigger house, more land for a better price. Even the homeowners insurance was like a third of what we were paying in Florida. But yeah.
Well, tell me something about your husband, Joseph.
Joe, we've been married. We celebrated our 33rd wedding anniversary on February 1st of this year,
Oh, that's
a few weeks
fantastic.
ago. He was worked for the CSX Railroad, or Florida East Coast. He started out, and then CSX Railroad, where he's now retired after
Well,
28
CSX
years.
goes right through Acworth.
Mm-hmm. It sure does.
So,
Yeah.
did he work for the railroad when he came up here?
Yes, he had continued working with the railroad, CSX Transportation. He was there for like 28 years.
And you've got 3 children,
3 children, yes, Matthew, Joshua, and Jessica.
and they were all born before you came here?
Yes, they were all born before I came.
Okay.
And 2 grandchildren now,
Oh,
Josiah
wow.
and Alea.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. So how did you find out about the job as a city clerk?
I remember on one of the adventures between us, kind of scouting out the place and then making the decision. I was at my sister-in-law's on her computer and just going through the system in terms of municipal government jobs, and came across the city of Acworth. And I'm like, oh my gosh, Acworth, what? I hope I'm pronouncing it correctly. And I saw the position for a city clerk, but my first question was, what is and where is Acworth?
Yeah.
And I kind of started reading up on it, going through the website or what have you, and I applied for the position. I want to say back in maybe the summer, and I got a call from the former city manager, Mr. Bultice, like around October, advising that I was accepted for the position. That's, of course, after I went through an interview process with him and the council.
Okay, so you had to come here for an interview.
Yes.
And then you knew. What was your first impression when you came to Acworth?
I was about in tears because I thought I was going to be late for the interview. For some reason, a hurricane had just come through there. That was like September of 2004, and a tree had fallen across the road or what have you, and I had to take a detour. And I'm like, oh, I know I've just messed this up. I'm going to be totally late. And I think I made it here. My interview was at 4 o'clock. I made it here at 3:59.
Oh, no.
And but my impression was, oh my gosh, it's just such a small town feel. And I was kind of looking around, and I was intimidated even by a small town feel coming from a big city like Miami.
Well, no, I said 2004. Was this building here then?
Yes, they just completed construction on this building in April of 2004, and I
Okay.
came in October.
Okay, so you had to find it first. of all.
Yes. Yes. It was a little scary, but I was so thankful that I was able to slide right in the door and be here at 3:59 for them to open the door at 4 for me to start my interview.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I'm glad you made it on time.
I am too, thank God.
Once you started working here and you began to get to know the city, you were telling me a story earlier about spending a whole lot of money on food.
Oh,
to begin
yes.
with. We want to talk about I guess the restaurants. Or
Yes, I was kind of afraid to venture out because I didn't want to get lost trying to find my way back to City Hall. But people would tell me about the great restaurants on Main Street back then. What is now Center Street Tavern was Cotton Eye Joe's. And also there was Henry's, he's been there for a long time, Mrs. L's. Can't remember what else. Food Schools didn't come until later, but I remember going out for lunch and just being able to walk across the street or walk downtown and going to all these shops and see these antiques and boutiques and things like that. But when I ate lunch, I remember spending an average of about $70, $80. That included tips, almost a week on lunch because I didn't know exactly where else to go. And it wasn't until I finally asked someone, it probably was a few months later, and said, is there a KFC around here or a Burger King? And it was like, oh yeah, right across the railroad track. So about a month or two later, I ventured across the railroad tracks, and I was like, oh my gosh, they do have a KFC, they have a Taco Bell, they have a McDonald's. So that was interesting. But even after I found that out, I still was like wanting to stay in the area because the food was so good. You know, there was different selections. Things were fresh, and you got your sandwiches and subs right here from a couple of feet from City Hall. So that was nice.
Nobody said, let's go to lunch and showed you where to go?
I want to say that I don't remember maybe the first time I went out for lunch, but I'm sure there were times that people would take me, and that's probably why I got hipped on to the downtown restaurants. But yeah.
So at any rate, Acworth, 18 years ago, had a nice downtown, but also had the fast food places. You just had to go out.
Yes, venture out.
What else was your impression of Acworth? You weren't living here, I gather, at that time.
No, I wasn't. Like I said, we moved in 2004, October 2004. Actually, my husband came down in April because he got a transfer from the railroad from where he was working in Hialeah, and I didn't come until October. We had already bought our house in 2000, the end of 2003 or what have you. So the house kind of just set, but we actually live in Kennesaw, and we've been there for 18 years. And I remember coming when just sitting down at lunch at Cotton Eye Joe's at the time, which is now Center Street, and just looking down the street and kind of looking out, and it's like, oh my gosh, I've moved to Mayberry. And I say that in a good way because of the downtown feel, the quaintness of the community and so forth. And I actually thought that Acworth was a lot smaller than what it is. I didn't know it's big and massive, in terms of area, but I thought I had migrated to a much smaller place than what Acworth actually is. Yeah.
So it took you a while to find out.
Yes, it did.
Well, we've had only one mayor the whole 18 years here. And
that's been nice.
A number of people, I guess Butch Price was on the city, Board of Aldermen at that time.
And Tim Richardson.
And
Tim Houston.
Tim Houston, I guess, was. So at least three of the five. So that's unusual to have so little turnover.
Yes.
In a city.
Yes, it's a great city.
So I guess, and you had the same city manager up until this last
24,
year.
almost 24 years, yes.
So that's a lot of continuity.
Yes.
I guess, which I guess in some ways can be a very good thing.
Yes, it makes our job a lot easier. I know that for every election that cities have, you have to, if you get anyone new, you have to go through the newly elected training and kind of filling them in on how things go. So it just makes it easy, just going from one election to the next, and just people just continue on as they have, But
don't have to adjust to a new personality.
Not too much.
So
it was very nice.
I know you've said some nice things about the mayor and what have you, and the sign over his door.
Yes.
It's not about me.
Yes.
Can you talk about maybe the culture of city government in Acworth and philosophy?
Acworth is definitely community. As I had mentioned that. I remember going into the mayor's office to get something signed or what have you, or to leave it on his desk. And when I turned around, this probably was like a month after I had been here, and turning around and just happening to look above the door, and he has this sign, it's not about me. And I was like, wow, that is something that's, quite impressive. And I know that since I've known him, he's lived up to that character, and he makes sure that it's not about him. And that's kind of the way that I've always thought about myself, as a public servant, that it's not about me, it's about others, it's about the community, it's about the real reason why I'm here and why I've accepted the job. But he really lives up to that statement. And as far as Acworth, it's definitely all about the community. It's about the citizens. It's about the schools, the children, the businesses, and so forth, even the employees, So I'm very appreciative to have been a part of Acworth for 18 years, and pray that I will continue. God will continue to see me through, through retirement. It's a blessing to be here.
Speaking of prayer, you've gone from Judaism to the Baptist church. How'd that happen?
Yeah, actually, Judaism to Christianity, and I got saved. Remember being saved at the age of 28, asking the Lord to come into my heart with you to really open up things in a much greater perspective and hope for my life and who I am. I remember people always, even before I got saved, people would say, "Oh, you're such a good person." And, it wasn't, until one day I was sitting at my desk and someone had given me this little book with a yellow face on it, and it says, "Smile, Jesus loves you." And I'm sitting at my desk, I'm at my wits' end through some things I was going through, and I started reading through it, but the part that struck me is you're not going to make it to heaven by your good works. And I was like, oh my God. And it was like at that point, I was like, Lord, what must I do to be saved? And it just, I've been in a relationship with my Lord and Savior Jesus Christ since 28. And it's like, as far as from Judaism to Christianity to Baptist, I don't look at the different denominations. I look at my relationship with God through Jesus Christ, and I'm thankful for that. I can go to any church and worship, or probably go to a Catholic church and, be able to worship because I have a relationship, with God through Jesus Christ. So that's the main thing.
Say something about Mount Olivet.
Mount Olivet Baptist Church, it's a wonderful place to worship, even more so to get the Word of God. Pastor Michael Smith, he's been there for over 10 years, and I really, what keeps me there is that he preaches the unadulterated Word of God. And I'm involved in a lot of things like the leadership committee, secretary, treasurer, just helping out with the nursery and so forth. So I really thankful for my service there.
Great. Well, let's talk a little bit about being city clerk. Were the records in good shape when you came here?
Pretty much, yes. I remember Sandra Henson. She was the personnel administrator at the time, and she taught me everything that I needed to know and needed to be familiar with, and she showed me the records and so forth, and even keeping everything on a log, which now we know we have a more electronic process, but everything was in pretty good shape for the most part.
Okay. So I guess at least one of your major functions is preserving the records of the city.
I am the records custodian in accordance to the charter. And in terms of anything from preserving the minutes or our ordinances, resolutions, proclamations, any type of vital records, like if anything ever happened to City Hall, God forbid, or, we would be able to start the process over or know where to begin in terms of our minutes and our code of ordinances. We have to make sure those are updated on an annual basis. I'm involved with pretty much all the records, even from the different departments. We have like 10 different departments, if I'm not mistaken, or department heads, and I'm responsible for all those records and other city facilities as well, such as Public Works, Parks and Recreation. PD and court, they pretty much keep their records in terms of the different, cases and so forth, but anything dealing with contracts, agreements, and so forth, I'm responsible
like
for.
Parks and Rec turn their records over to you?
If we have anything on the agenda like agreements and contracts, after they get them signed by whatever party, depending on what the contract is, they bring the original or signed copy back to me, and I keep that on file or store that on file.
How computerized were the records when you came here? 18
Not at all.
Not at all.
Everything is more paper copy, the file folders and things like that. Yeah.
So where are all those file folders now?
They're locked in the storage room downstairs,
I see.
where we keep everything by department, and we have a list of all the different types of agreements and so forth on file. But we are more transitioning to document imaging and actually storing those things on, electronically.
Are you going back and doing digitization of any of the old records?
Not as of yet, but that's something that we're going to have to plan for and so forth, especially some of the older records. I believe our oldest minute or ordinance book, I would say minute book, goes back to 1908. So even preserving things
Just
like
the
that.
1908.
1908.
So we don't have any minutes of Board of Aldermen?
Oh, we
before
do.
1908?
1908. I want to say that's the oldest. And then we have other minutes, after that period or after those years and so forth that we store downstairs, yes.
What happened to the earlier records for Acworth?
That I'm not sure of. I was just shown like this is what, this is as far back as we go or what have you. So that I'm not too sure
Do
of.
any of the records go to like the state archives or?
No, everything here is stored on
Everything's
site.
here.
Hmm.
Okay, so hopefully the building doesn't burn down.
No, hopefully it doesn't.
Before they get
Not
there.
yes until we
Did y'all
get.
have microfilm records?
I have never I've never dealt with microfilm records here.
But at least all the current records are digitized, or most of them, the minutes and.
No, well, yes, the minutes. As far as the minutes, ordinances, and things like that,
But
yes.
a lot of other paper
Mhm.
records still.
Yes, and a lot of them became digitized after I came. So, like, I would say 2004 on, we can, like, someone could call and say, I need a digital, record or whatever. We could just pull it up on the computer and forward it to them, email or what have you.
What about retention schedules?
We go by the Georgia Archives local retention schedule and destruction schedule. Yes, that's what the city has adopted or referred to. Yes.
And I guess you mentioned Brian Bodius a little bit earlier. So do you report to the city manager or to the mayor? Or?
Yes, I report to the city manager and also the council. They're like my bosses as well, but I
They're all your
report
bosses.
directly to the city manager, yes.
Okay. Or you tell them what to do?
No, that's what people say, but no, they tell me what they need and do my best to get it to them.
Okay. Why don't you've talked about it a little bit, but what does it mean to be a public servant to you?
What it means to be a public servant, I believe humility plays a big part of it. Just being available to people, giving a listening ear, doing sometimes beyond the call of duty. I mentioned about sometimes you may miss a lunch break because someone has something that they need filled out or notarized or what have you, or you're staying a little bit after hours and so forth. Just doing whatever it takes. I mean, to the point where I've had to go to someone's house to get something notarized because they were incapacitated, whatever it takes. And I thank God I've learned that through being a servant of Jesus Christ in terms of the meaning of public servant really is.
We'd asked you before the interview about things that no one else knows about you until now.
Yes.
And you mentioned that no one would define you as an introvert.
No. I'm like the last person that would get up on a soapbox, or if someone say we need someone for a public speaking engagement, I'm going to go run and hide in the back or what have you. But I'm definitely a sociable person. I love talking to people, finding out about them and what I can do to assist or to help them in terms of their time in life or, whenever God makes the connection. But I like talking to people one-on-one. I think we're doing
Well,
great.
that sounds more like an introvert in some ways.
But as far as getting out and public speaking and things like that, I'm just, I guess I'm becoming more confident, but that's always been a discomfort for me.
Okay. So
Yeah.
you don't want to be a member of the Kiwanis Club?
No, I'd have to be a member of the Kiwanis Club.
Not that you
But
haven't
only if
stayed
they
as
need me in
Kiwanis.
the capacity where they can give me a pencil or pen and some paper and shove me in the corner in the basement, I'm fine. But yeah.
Okay. Well, let's talk a little bit about Acworth. And first of all, how has it changed in the 18 years that you've been here?
A lot of redevelopment, a lot of development, more homes, more businesses, improvement on the roadways and so forth, transportation improvements. It's changed a lot. I mean, where there once was a lot of trees, now there's a home or a business or what have you there. So it's changed a lot. I always look at Acworth, the connection between Miami and Georgia per se, or even in the Kennesaw community, or even in the Acworth community, that it went from 70% country when I moved here and 30% city. Now it's more 30% country and 70% city. So there have been a lot of changes in the past 18 years that I've seen.
Mm-hmm. Urbanization or suburbanization? Or how would you
Yes.
define it? There's been some controversy in Cobb County about people that don't want to urbanize.
I would say I don't want to see a whole lot of development. I'm more of the, I like the trees and the nature and getting out and being able to just walk without having to, or to drive without having to go through too many traffic lights, or sitting in traffic. I live right off of Stylesboro Road, and that can be a nightmare just depending on whatever time of day it is and how long you're going to sit in traffic, especially during rush hour or school hours in the morning and so forth. So I'm more like keep it on a small scale. Leave the trees, take the city more out to in other areas where hasn't been so much growth, or that needs some new roadways or what have you. But I don't welcome construction in really dense areas too much, because I like the country feel.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, I was coming around 92 this morning with that new bridge. That
Oh,
they're
and the
putting
92
in.
bridge, yes, that's really nice.
I guess to make traffic move better.
Mm-hmm,
through
it
that
does. It's really nice. It's a great improvement.
And so the growth that should have, I guess it affects your work, doesn't it? There's a lot more work to do as the city grows.
Not too much. I guess because it's a gradual growth. It's not all of a sudden, you've gone from 10,000 residents to 20,000 overnight or what have you. But just gradually and just keeping up with things, with the pace of how everything is growing, has been pretty, easy. Mm-hmm. At least for me as a city clerk, I wouldn't speak for every department because I'm sure Public Works, they have their, times, and Parks and Recs and so forth, with more residents coming in and the different programs that we offer. So,
Well, what makes Acworth special to you?
oh my gosh, just even though it's a big city, the small town feel, I guess, being close to downtown, the people. I know the mayor always speaks about quality of life, and that's been a vision of his for a very long time. And just being able to see all the things that are happening, even though I'm not a big fan of growth, like I say, in really condensed areas, but at the same time, just the development that's going across the street from Lemon Street in the depot, in terms of there's going to be townhomes soon, and a commercial or retail component, and the restaurant, the 1885 grill. I mean, just welcoming the new businesses and so forth, and knowing that you're a part of the growth here in Acworth is a blessing.
Cobb County has become far more diverse than it was 20 years ago, and especially far more diverse than 40 or 50 years ago. And I think the latest figures I saw in Acworth were about 26% African American. Could you talk a little bit about that? Have you seen it become more diverse while you've been here?
I think the diversity, I want to say that it's always been there in a sense. And like I say, my first experience, having lunch downtown and so forth, and it wasn't until I crossed the railroad tracks, I was like, okay, there are African Americans here. And I thought it was just like a predominantly,
you didn't see any African Americans?
No, not many, no. And I thought it was a predominantly Caucasian community or what have you. And even, coming to being the first African American city clerk, or the first African American at City Hall, working at City Hall and things like that. So I really didn't know a lot about the diversity in the community until I started getting out and kind of venturing out and so forth. Yeah.
So I guess Tim Houston, we said, was already on the council.
Yes, he was already on the council. That's the first.
And before him,
was
Hill.
Doyle Hill, yes. And also, I believe, yes, Doyle Hill,
But
I believe was the first.
Workforce.
Not in the workforce, not here at City Hall.
At City Hall. Was that an objective for the city, or would it just happen by happenstance? Or?
I think it just by happenstance.
Okay.
Yes, I don't believe it was an objective.
Is it an objective now to have a diverse workforce that looks like the people of Acworth?
I would say yes, but that's not something, I believe we put experience and character and leadership first, in terms of before diversity or what have you. But I know that the city is very diverse.
Yeah. And yet, you were talking about crossing the tracks, and you used to have where the Rosenwald School is, and Bethel AME,
AME,
and so on, that was a historic black neighborhood that's gone now. And it's all parkland, I
Yes.
guess, for the city now. And yet, it appears to me, and maybe you can correct me on this, but there aren't any distinct black neighborhoods so much as the population's spread throughout the area. Is that,
I would
what
say,
would you say?
I would say, like I was talking to you about Evelyn Gregg before, and I know that was kind of like, I kind of saw that as like more of like the black area of Acworth, right along North Side Drive or what have you.
Right.
But I think there's still that population right there with the Bethel AME and Roberts School. That's another, if I'm not mistaken, black historic instructional facility back in the day. But I just think it's kind of like all blended in. I know they've since knocked down a couple of homes over, if I'm not mistaken, also Miss Gregg's, and some townhomes or other single-family homes were built there. So you got a lot of diversity, in terms of different, races and cultures and stuff, but it just all blends in. It's not so much as a black area, or at least that I know or what I've experienced. So there still may be places that I'm not 100% sure of because I just haven't, crossed that path or what have you. But I see the Acworth as being very diverse.
But it hadn't been a big deal for
No.
you to...
Not at all. As a matter of fact, the city I came from, Village of Upper Town, I was the first black village clerk, so it's kind of like a pattern there. And I want to say I may or may not have been the first black employee, if not the second, or African American employee. So yeah, it wasn't a big deal when I came to Acworth.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, any last thoughts or anything that you'd like to put in the interview that we haven't talked about?
I would definitely like to just thank God for allowing me to be here. I know He directed me to the right place when I was seeking employment. I'm just so thankful to have gained, the experience I have gained over the years. I thank God for the opportunity for allowing me to serve, the Acworth community. And I know I mentioned before in my interview questions that even though it's not home, but it's definitely a home away from home for me. So Acworth is definitely part of my heart. And I'm appreciative of all the employees and my coworkers and the elected officials that I work with, and also the public, our community. Very proud of our community.
Well, maybe that's a good way to end the interview.
Okay.
Well, thank you.
You're quite welcome. Thank you for the opportunity to interview as well.